Hello, and welcome back to the Emerge Stronger podcast. Melody, how are you today?
Doing great. What about you?
Awesome. Yes, I'm excited because today is the launch of our new website. And so I think that's super exciting.
Yes, it definitely is.
Yes, so it's a good day. All right, so today we are talking about pride, and it's something that we mentioned in our last podcast. And I think it's safe to say that, there's a lot of people out there that will judge other people because they see them as having prideful behaviors. But I would also say that we all deal with pride.
Definitely.
I think that's probably one of the most, when we're talking about sin, every single one of us probably has some sort of pride each and every day. And so I think it's good to be aware of that. We talk about self-awareness a lot. And so it's good to be aware of, some of the prideful things that we do or the behaviors that we have. But we also want to recognize that maybe it's something that we need to change. And it's something important in order to strengthen our relationships and just to be better people. And so that's what we're talking about today. I'm going to go over a couple of common prideful phrases, and then we're going to dive deeper into talking about that as well as prideful behaviors. So,
Great.
how does that sound?
Sounds great.
All right, let's go. Prideful phrases. Okay, number one, I don't need help. So this is when somebody's refusing assistance, even when struggling. And it implies that they have self-sufficiency is more important than collaboration.
Mhm.
Number two is, I'm always right. Dismissing others' perspectives or refusing to consider alternative viewpoints. I can say that I have several clients that I think fall into this category of thinking that they are always right.
I was one of those people that struggled with because of my personality type. It's like I was always right. And that was a major factor in my marriage.
Yeah, I think that that's one we can dive deeper in on. The next one is, at least I'm not like them. That's putting yourself superior over anyone else.
Mhm.
Number four is, they wouldn't understand. And so that's assuming that others are incapable of understanding or contributing to your situation. I also see that as kind of like a superiority thing, like, oh, they wouldn't understand. They don't have my life, live my life, or, anything like that. Number five is, I could have done it better, downplaying someone else's efforts or accomplishments. Number six, they owe me, operating from entitlement rather than gratitude or fairness. Remind me to share a story about that one.
Mhm.
I deserve this because I worked harder than anyone else. Overemphasizing personal effort while dismissing the contributions or struggles of others. Three more. Number eight, I'm not apologizing. I didn't do anything wrong. That is refusing to accept responsibility or acknowledge a misunderstanding. Number nine, if they don't like it, that's their problem. That's showing a lack of empathy for how one's actions affect others. And number 10, they should have known better than to mess with me. That one sounds really chauvinistic to me, like macho man, and that one's a vengeful or self-righteous attitude.
Mhm.
So those are the top 10 phrases that people use that have, prideful behaviors. And then we'll talk about those in a second, and then we'll dive deeper into recognizing what those prideful behaviors are.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts?
So I just want to mention now, because we're believers, we know the reason why Satan was cast into hell was because of pride. And I believe that God takes this very seriously. And it's something that we need to be mindful because sometimes we do operate in pride. I mean, I don't want to call it human nature. I'll call it flesh nature. It's the nature of the flesh. It's not the nature of the spirit. And when we're walking according to the flesh, you are going to see pride. You're going to see selfishness. It's about me, or I'm better than someone else. Arrogance. You'll see arrogance.
Mhm.
And as believers, we should cast off those things. Now I'm saying that as if it's just a matter of like casting it off. No, what it is a heart change, and it takes time sometimes to get to that place where you surrender that to the Lord. And I think, and we've talked about this before, that people struggle with that because they have to look at themselves in the mirror and say, maybe I've missed the mark. Maybe I'm not showing up as the best version of myself. And so it takes you into the level of accountability. And sometimes that's hard to do. So I don't want to make it seem like, oh, you cast it off and you're accountable and it's no big deal. That there's a process in that. But if we really want to walk according to the Spirit, we have to start by casting off that pride. So let's kind of dive deeper. I don't need help. And there's a lot of these that I have struggled with personally. And some of it has to do with, attachment style, which is a topic that we talk about on almost every podcast because it is so prevalent in why we do the things that we do. And for me, I can tell you there's times when I thought I didn't need help because I viewed the fact that I needed help as weakness.
Mm-hmm.
There's been times when I took pride in the fact that I didn't cry because that means I'm strong if I didn't cry. But in reality, it's the opposite. Like a person that's willing to cry, I mean, that's kind of like it starts the healing process. A person that's refusing to try to cry or to hold it back, sometimes it's because of pride, and I don't want to be viewed as weak. Sometimes it's because people don't want to be too much either. Like, oh, I don't want to be overly dramatic. I don't want to be a burden to people. So there's different reasons, right, why people would do that. But specifically on I don't need help, that is rooted in pride.
Mm-hmm.
It's saying that, I can do this all by myself. But when you really look at somebody that refuses to open themselves up to help, they tend to feel overwhelmed a lot in their life. And so if you want to let pride guide you, it's going to put you to a place where, you might just be like, I can't do this anymore,
Yeah.
because of just being overwhelmed from it.
Yeah. That's definitely one that I have dealt with. I don't need help. I'll just do it myself.
Right. And I mean, I get sometimes, especially as a mom, it's just like if they don't do it the way I want them to do it, then I'll just do it myself and all of that. But it's a great teaching moment for kids when you include them in whatever activity that you're doing. But sometimes it's like, I don't need help. I'll do it by myself. And you see a lot of this, and I'm speaking as a woman, you know, if they've been abandoned by a male partner or something like that, sometimes bitterness or pride can rise up and be like, screw you, I can do this by myself. And, that's something that I dealt with too. I mean, I think at some point in time in my life, I've dealt with every single one of these, right? And so, we have to be mindful that it's okay that we open ourselves to help. And actually, that leads to teamwork, being able to collaborate.
Mhm.
And when you are working on something, you're looking at it from only your perspective. But when you bring, other people in, you see other sides and you want those other people because and just talk about our team and the merger. Like each of us, Priscilla, you, Aaron, me, we bring something different to the table.
Right.
And when it was just Priscilla and I, we only viewed things the way Priscilla and I viewed them. And when it was just you and Aaron, it was like y'all only view the way y'all did. But now that we're collaborating together, we're seeing, that, oh, we got to look at it this way and this way and this way and this way.
Yeah.
And it makes us a well-rounded individual. So I don't want to spend all the time on that one because I know there's a lot more that we need to get to. But yeah, open yourself up so that you can hear somebody else's perspective. It actually makes the team better. It helps you reach more people, all of that thing. So
Yeah. One thing I just want to add to that is that speaking of, it's not over leadership team, we all have different, for a little bit, all have different behavioral styles as far as the disc is concerned. And so I think that's pretty cool too, because I feel like that really balances us out. And like you were talking about, just bringing different perspectives and thinking about things in a different way. And so it just makes it a really cool dynamic for our team.
right. Absolutely. I love it. The next one is I'm always right. And so there are some components of that one. And because of my behavioral style, I'm an analytical person. And before I make a decision, I try to go down every potential avenue. What are the potential risks in this situation? What is the reward? Which one do I want to, choose, and all that. So it takes me time. I think about a story with that when the engine in my old vehicle blew and I had to get a new vehicle. It like took me 3 months to decide what vehicle, because I'm like going down all the details of, which is going to be the smart purchase. Finally to the point where my husband was like, just pick a stupid vehicle, like pick one. So I did finally. But my mindset was, I want to be right. And because I am like that and I do my research, I will sometimes make somebody else feel stupid because I'm like, no, you're wrong. Now, I don't want to approach it like that anymore. Now, I really try to be more inclusive of somebody else's opinion and all that. Most of us do think that we're right, though, when we come to the table, and we hate to be wrong. And for a C on the disc, they really hate to be wrong. They
Yeah.
don't want to be wrong. But I have realized that in life, there are times when I am wrong, and I've allowed wise people to influence me. That's the key. The wise people. You don't want
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
fools, so to speak, to influence you, but I've allowed wise people to influence me and help shape the way I see things. And when you're a kid, a teenager, you think your parents don't know anything, and then you grow up and you're like, oh, my parents were brilliant. They were so smart. Wise people, my parents, they shaped me. So it's important that you don't create, because when you are saying I'm right, what you're saying is somebody else is wrong. And especially in any type of relationship, whether it be child, marriage, work, or whatever, if you are just buckling down and saying I'm right and you're wrong, what you're doing is driving that person further away from you. You're
Yes.
actually destroying your influence that you have with that person, and it
Mhm.
becomes destructive in whatever relationship you're in.
Yeah. I want to take a minute. I know we have a lot to get through, and we might have to do a part 2 of this podcast, because I want to ask you a couple questions and share this story with you. I was talking to somebody about 6 months ago, and you know, she's going through some marital issues, and we were talking about this always being right. And I said to her, I said, "But what if you're not right? What if you're wrong?" And she was like, "No, I know I'm right." I mean, she was like grounded and rooted in the fact that she was right. And we kind of went back and forth, and I was asking her some questions. And I asked her, I said, "I want to understand, what's so wrong? What's so bad about being wrong and not being right?" And she couldn't answer it. So several hours go by, and we talk about this again. And come to find out, it goes back to her childhood.
Mhm.
If I'm wrong, I'm afraid that that person is going to leave me. They're going to think less of me. They're not
Mhm.
going to like me. And so I just thought that that conversation was really, really interesting, really fascinating, like eye-opening for me, because I was determined to figure out what is so bad about being wrong.
Mhm.
And so, do you feel as though, from your perspective, and you said, you used to deal with this, where does that come from?
Well, I think it does have to do with, like, for me, my own story, there were significant circumstances in my life where I do believe that I was right, and in childhood, and an adult told me I was wrong or told me I was a failure.
Mm,
And so then, the defensiveness comes up. And what it did, and this is how we have to reframe those experiences in childhood, what it did was make me a researcher.
mhm,
And so we can either, and our strength is sometimes our weakness too, right? So the fact that I do research and want to learn is not a bad thing. But when I use what I learn against other people to prove them wrong, now, if we're in a debate, okay, yeah, I understand, but in relationships, it's not a debate, it's a negotiation. And so if
mhm,
I'm like pointing that you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, and I'm not leaving space for that person, or having acceptance of that person's opinion, or that person's feelings, then what I'm doing is creating division. And it's no longer a negotiation. It's like, I'm right, you're wrong, I've won, you've lost. And so the very thing that hurt me when I was a kid, in those different circumstances, it made me become that. like it made me become and make other people feel that way. And, through crisis, I had to learn, oh, I have to shift. I have to look at things differently. And, the older we get, we do sometimes get set in our ways. And
Mhm.
and I do believe for me personally, that's why God has given me children that are older, children that are younger, because they teach me just as much as I've taught them in many things, and just listening to their opinions and stuff like that. And I was a young mom, and now I'm an older mom, and I see how, things that they're learning, and, just the change of culture and stuff like that, that I have to do things differently as a parent. Because when they were the older kids, it was like, it's my way, I'm right, you're going to do it the way I say. With the younger ones, I'm not necessarily like that. I'm like, let's talk it out.
Yeah.
And because although, you know, they should respect me as their parent, and I do feel like my children do, I can see how me being right and you being wrong would divide us, right? And it could
Mhm.
potentially breed rebellion in that child, or cause that child to not feel loved by me, because I'm like, you're the problem. Now, hopefully, they, maybe they will bring themselves to research, which isn't a bad thing. But if it's to research to use it against somebody else, that's when it's wrong.
Yeah.
If it's research to bring people together and give, your insight, that's great. Any strength that we have can also be a weakness. It just depends on how we use it.
Yeah. One other thing that I think is, and I'm going to say attractive, I think it's really attractive when somebody can say, like, if I were to go to you, Melody, and you and I had like a debate about something, and then I walk away from that, and I come back to you after I've thought about it, and I come back to you and I say, you know what, Melody, you were right. I looked at it a different way, and I understand your perspective, and you were right. And I know you, like, I know you, and you're not going to be prideful knowing that I said that to you, like, you're like, chest up, I know I was right.
Mhm.
You are just going to take that and, like, I'm glad we could resolve that.
Mhm.
It's not that you were just wanting to be right so bad. It's
Mhm.
that you and I have come together and, had a discussion about it.
Right.
So, and I think it's really cool when parents can do that to their kids. And
Ab-
I've actually had to humble myself and walk into my daughter's room and sit on her bed and say, I was wrong. You were right.
Mhm. Mhm. I have done that too. I wish I would have done that to the older ones, where I would come back and, apologize. Like, I handled that the wrong way, or I should have considered your perspective. Maybe I should have been a little bit more lenient, on those circumstances. But I have done it with my younger kids, and I do see that, that they are close to me. Now that my older ones are older, I have gone back and said, I should have done things differently. Like, I owned that. And they have both been so very gracious about that, or at least up until this point, they have been. Who knows what's to come? But they've been both very gracious about that, and I explained, when I had you, I was young and I was still growing up.
Mhm.
I was still trying to learn, and I had never been a parent before. And so what I was doing is basing it on what my parents did. And although I had great parents, they didn't do everything right either,
Yeah,
And so anyway, yeah, it's a great thing to go and reconcile those relationships with your kids, and don't let your pride be the thing that stops you from doing that, because it's really about relationship. And I think that
absolutely.
God, this is why parents are so important to children. I know this is not what the topic is about, but they're so important to children because they are representation of what God is to us. And if we have parents that are just missing the mark, or abandoning, or whatever, then it paints a picture of what God is, and it distorts that picture.
Mm,
And people will carry that for years and view God in sometimes a negative way. I remember thinking this, Sonia, sometimes, God, I know you do things for people, but will you do it for me? And somewhere along the lines, I got this distortion. Why wouldn't he do it for me? If he loves this person and that person, why wouldn't he love me? But sometimes, in the mix, because I'm fearful avoidant, and one of the core wounds is I'm unlovable.
Mm,
And so even in my relationship with the Lord, I would see myself as unlovable. And
yeah.
that's something, even to this day at 50 years old, I have to struggle and remind myself, of course he loves me. He sent his son for me. Like, of course he does. Right. And to trust that, to trust. And it took years and years and years to get to the place where, I've been willing to even surrender that, you know, and so, and not view God as a man on a throne, or, a deity on the throne with a ruler ready to smack me if I'm doing wrong. Now, does he want me to do wrong? No. He chastens the ones that he loves.
Hmm.
And I'm grateful for that. It's painful, but I'm grateful for that because I will course correct, you know. But that love, like, I am lovable because he says I'm lovable because he sent his son. Anyway, rabbit trail. Sorry about
That was
that.
so good, though. I loved that. Thank you for saying that. Okay, we are definitely going to have to do a part two. So let's try to
Maybe
get
even a
through.
part three.
Yeah, let's try to get through the rest of the phrases.
Mhm,
And yeah, okay. The next one is at least I'm not like them.
mhm. So when I think about that, I think of like the older brother in the prodigal son story,
Hmm.
and how he was like, I've been here the whole time and you didn't throw me a party. At least I wasn't like him, and yet here you are giving him a party. And I understand that mindset, but what if he never asked for the party? And the father literally said, all I have is yours. Like,
Mhm.
you've never been without it. We could have done that. And I think that when we look at people that are in compromising circumstances, sometimes we will look at that. But here's the thing, when my kids were growing up, at this point in time, I was still a single mom. And I remember seeing, we were driving somewhere. I think it was sometime downtown San Antonio or something like that. And there were some people that looked like they were on drugs. They looked like they were definitely on hard times and all of that. And I can't even remember which kids said something about it. And I told them, do not judge those people, because just a series of wrong decisions and we could all be there. So never look down on people, like, to actually have compassion for those type of people, or pray for those type of people, because we don't know their circumstances. We don't know what they've been through. And the things that we do are are a result of our decisions, but our history makes a difference. And what if they didn't have somebody to show them love? What if all they saw was their parents using drugs? What if some catastrophic experience happened to them that led them to where they are here? And I'm not excusing the decisions. Like, people make decisions, but nobody wakes up in the morning and decides to be a drug addict. Like, they don't say, oh, that sounds like a great career path. No, it's a series of decisions, and it's all from hurt. And so I tried to explain to them that the people are in the position because of the pain that they've experienced in their life. And so we cannot judge those people. We can, however, be grateful that our life experiences were different, and that God had people in our lives to guide us, and all that kind of stuff. We can be grateful that we're in a different place, but we don't want to judge them.
Hmm. Yes, that is such a good reminder. I was actually reading a book this morning that talked about just that. Like, it's a church in Manhattan, and around the corner was male prostitutes. And the church, of course, people turn their nose at that, and the churchgoers that walk into the building, want to stay far away from them. But some of the other church members started inviting these people to the church, and one of them was a drag queen cross dresser, and he ended up getting saved.
Wow.
And I mean, it was just the most beautiful story. And so I made me think about that when you were saying, just
Mhm,
really be careful who to judge, because
mhm,
these people are broken and they're hurting and they need love.
mhm. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. They wouldn't understand.
I think this one is rooted in kind of like, oh, it's pride, but condescension.
Hmm.
They're not as smart as me. I definitely know people in my life that that I have seen that just assume that somebody else is not intelligent enough. And people can surprise you of how intelligent they have been. I remember when I worked at a credit union, I was the trainer, and I would train people how to do their jobs, and then train them on the culture and the service. And one of the branches that we had was in the high school, and so we would hire high school students, I think seniors, to actually work as tellers. And so I would spend 6 weeks with these young people, talking to them about service, talking to them about, teaching them how to do transactions and all that kind of stuff. And we would have some deep conversations, and they would come out with these profound things that helped me learn. So don't ever underestimate someone, because even the person that may not have the education that you have can say profound, like really profound things. And so, don't assume that you're always the smartest person in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, the next one, I could have done it better. Downplaying somebody else's accomplishments.
Mhm. I really think that has a lot of jealousy in it.
Mhm.
And my daughter had a recent experience that she loves art, and she draws all the time. And she showed one of her drawings to a friend, supposedly, and the friend just said, "That's the ugliest thing. I've never liked it." But come to find out, like, she's also somebody that likes to draw. And I told Layla, I was just like, babe, I think that has a lot to do with jealousy. She said, "But mom, like, I stopped drawing for like 2 months because of that." And I said, "Understand, and maybe you put too much weight on her opinion about something that you do, but I really think that it's rooted and grounded in jealousy." And so if you want to be better at whatever it is that you love, then cultivate that, right? Invest in your.
Mhm.
That's all I have to say on that one.
Yeah, I agree. All right, here's a good one. They owe me.
Yes. And so, because of the line of work that we do, people that come to us are typically hurt by someone. It
Mhm.
could be their parent, it could be their child, it could be their spouse, it could be a lot of different scenarios. And one of the things that I try to communicate with clients is, don't weigh sin,
Yeah.
and think that, there's a scripture in the Bible that says, you're worried about the speck in the other person's eye when you have a plank in your own eye.
Mhm.
Try to tell clients, like, we can't weigh sin. Now, there are different consequences for different sins. So, for example, if somebody's speeding, that's breaking the law. The consequence for that is a ticket if you get caught. Murder is breaking the law, and the consequence of that is life in prison or whatever else, right? And so you both broke the law. Now, the consequences for which law you break is different. And so if you're going to sit here and weigh somebody else's sin against, and thinking that they owe you. I'm thinking of one particular couple right now where he is saying things like, what I did was not as bad as what she did, you know.
Mhm.
And I'm like, yeah, man, that doesn't fly. Like, you both didn't do the best of things in this situation.
Mhm.
So just trying to reiterate that. And I understand when we feel wronged, we feel like we deserve some. I think the word you used before we start this was right.
Recompense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I understand that, but all, like the Bible says, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And it also says that vengeance is mine. And so if we're sitting here waiting for this person to grovel at our feet, then I don't think that we have the right perspective. And I don't think that is going to be good. Like, and I don't, if you're having that mindset, it'll never be enough. A person
Exactly.
will never be able to do enough to gratify you or make that wound go away. What always has to be present is forgiveness.
100%.
In fact, they could do everything that you ask and then some, and it'll never be enough if you don't have forgiveness.
Absolutely. And so it makes me think of, a story of, a drunk driver killing a loved one, and you no longer have that loved one, but you sue the drunk driver and the drunk driver gives you $1 million. You still don't have your loved one. That's not going to that $1,000,000 is not going to fill or replace that loved one.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's until you have that forgiveness in your heart. I remember listening to a podcast. Oh, it was so good. And it was about how a young teenager killed this woman's daughter who was around I think she was maybe 17 or 18 years old, right before, graduating high school. The younger man went to prison, and the mother forgave him and wrote him letters in prison, and they created this relationship, and everybody's like, "What are you doing? He killed your daughter." Well, now this man is in his 40s, and speaking of consequences, there's the actual consequences of, like you're saying, like the physical consequences of going to prison or getting a ticket, but there's the emotional consequences that, I mean, sometimes are much harder than the actual act of going to prison or getting a ticket,
Mhm.
because you have to live with that, and emotionally that does so much to you internally.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a whole nother, that's like really deep and really good to, because, when you do your time, it's not like, if you have a parent that has used drugs and have been out of their child's life, like they come back, they get clean, they come back, they apologize and all that, but they have to live with the fact that they were gone from their children for so long. And so it's like the person is going to punish themselves enough. You don't need to punish them anymore.
Mhm.
And that's something they have to live with. It. That's a great point, Sonia. Great point.
Yeah. Okay. Let's try to knock out maybe one more. I deserve this because I worked harder than everyone else.
And here's the deal. Most of us believe that we should have been the pick for the promotion or the calling or whatever. But in these particular situations, I go back and I think about all authority is God given, and like maybe it's just not your time. Maybe there's still lessons for you to learn. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't times when things aren't unfair, because like politics exist, and all that. And I don't mean politics like blue and red, but a person knows a person and they're trying to help their friend, and I know all that stuff is real. But instead of getting bitter, get better.
Yeah.
Continue to work on yourself, continue to be the one that shines and supports, because I've been there when I've gotten the position, and I've been there when I haven't gotten the position, and I know it doesn't feel good, but you keep striving, you keep doing, and be their biggest cheerleader. I was going to say hero, but I meant cheerleader. Be their biggest cheerleader and support that, because at some point in time it will be your turn. you know Being a good leader comes about by holding yourself accountable for, even when you're down or depressed or whatever, that you're still showing up. And it's what you do with like the failures or the rejections. If you let those things defeat you, then you will never become a good leader. But if you take it in stride. Yeah, it's painful. And I'm not saying that you can't mourn over it or that you can't be hurt over it. I mean, that's just natural human nature. But what you do. So I often talk about, do you want to let your circumstance be a stumbling block or a stepping stone?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to get a whole lot more no's in life than you are yeses. And that's just it. And so what you choose to do with that no really makes a difference. I was listening to a podcast yesterday or the day before with Jordan Peterson and Dallas Jenkins, who's the creator
Yeah.
of The Chosen. And he said that The Chosen came about right after he did this movie. And I don't even know what the name of the movie is, but the movie failed and didn't even make the budget, I think, that they had to film the movie. And he was devastated, and his wife was devastated. And out of that came The Chosen. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was all in the posture of his heart. And he said, me and my wife were crying and upset and all that. And he said she kind of went into her prayer closet, and I kind of went into mine. And she came back, and I said, I think we need to read the story of when Jesus fed the 5,000 with the loaves and the fishes and our fish.
Yes.
Anyway, and he was devastated about that, and reading that and contemplating, okay, Lord, what does this mean? What does this mean? And then 4 a.m. the next morning, a friend of his had heard that the movie failed, right, and reached out to him, the other friends in Romania, and says, remember, it's not about feeding the 5,000. It is just bringing the fish and the loaves.
Mm.
After his wife said that, and like that was the beginning of the Chosen, which has been a successful enterprise and has helped millions of people come to
Yeah.
know Jesus. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I want to share a quick story before we wrap up. And as I was thinking about this, I deserve this because I worked harder than everyone else. I had a situation a couple years ago, and it wasn't that I felt as though I deserved it because I worked harder than anyone else. I just felt like I was in the same playing field as everyone else. And so, but I do remember like I wasn't chosen or I wasn't asked to do this particular thing. And I remember feeling like really down, like what, like kind of like, well, why wasn't I chosen? Because I did feel like I was on the same playing field as not everyone, but a couple others. But I remember also feeling like almost like this big tug, like Jesus telling me, this isn't for you.
Mhm.
And Melody, looking back, the absolute biggest blessing.
Mhm.
Thank you, Jesus. And
Yep.
I remember during that time period, I thought about it for maybe a day or so. And then I let it go because I'm
Mm.
like, he said this isn't for me.
Right.
So,
And I mean, when I look back on my life where I see things that didn't go my way, and again, most of them didn't go my way, right? uh, I'm thankful.
mhm.
I'm thankful because my life would have been totally different. I'm even thinking about a specific relationship that I was in for 3 years, and it ended abruptly, and I was devastated over that. I mean, I just cried. This was before I met my husband, and I cried and cried and cried. And now
Yeah.
I am grateful because my life would have been completely different.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been fun. We are going to have to do a part two. And so in the next episode, we're going to finish the prideful phrases, but then we're going to talk about prideful behaviors. And so we're just going to leave it there. So stay tuned.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to the Emerge Stronger podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. You can find our podcast on Apple and Spotify, or you can watch the podcast on YouTube by typing in Emerge Stronger Podcast in the search. To book coaching or for additional resources, please visit our website at itsnotover.net.